They laughed when Coca-Cola was thrown on the black woman at work, not knowing her billionaire father Big Shaq was watching. He didn't storm in with noise, he arrived with silence, truth and power. In a single day he tore down the walls built to humiliate her, and made sure the world knew dignity has a protector, and his name is Big Shaq. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The morning sunlight filtered through the high-rise windows of the Darnell penthouse, casting long golden shadows across the polished marble floors. The city stretched wide beneath the glass, Chicago alive with the hum of ambition and secrets. Yet Shaquilla Big Shaq Darnell didn't look out the window. His gaze was fixed on the heavy oak desk before him, fingers tapping a slow, deliberate rhythm. His empire stretched far beyond these walls. Real estate, tech, media, and a scattering of shell companies that no one dared probe too deeply. But none of it commanded his attention today. His focus, precise and unshakable, was on the text message he composed, encrypted, precise, unreadable to anyone but the recipient. Check in at noon. I'll be watching. Be careful. Across town, Rena Darnell adjusted her plain black blazer, trying not to draw attention. She kept her curls tucked into a tight bun and wore minimal makeup. To anyone at Hartwell and Brees Marketing, she was just another low-level project coordinator, competent but unremarkable. No one suspected she was the hidden daughter of Big Shaq, her identity shielded to avoid special treatment, and more importantly, to test her mettle in the corporate grind. Today had started like any other, an early subway ride, a stale bagel at her desk, and the quiet pulse of emails and spreadsheets. Yet beneath her calm surface, Rena sensed tension coiling in the office air like a tightening spring. The Hartwell and Brees office occupied 3 floors in a sleek downtown building, all glass and steel. Its open floor plan was designed to feel collaborative, but the hushed voices and lingering stares revealed its true nature. Rena noticed subtle cues, the junior account managers whispering after meetings, the way her ideas were politely dismissed during brainstorming sessions, the awkward pauses when she spoke up. None of it was blatant. No one used slurs or raised voices, but the undercurrent was unmistakable, a quiet exclusion that stung sharper than open hostility. She found herself in the break room at noon. As planned, a casual lunch was underway, hosted by her supervisor, the meticulously polished Reed Caldwell. Reed had a smile like a shark, and a handshake that squeezed just a fraction too hard. Team spirit, he called these gatherings. Rena sat at the far end of the conference table, balancing a plastic plate of bland pasta salad. Conversations ebbed around her. Safe topics, weekend plans, mild complaints about clients. She nodded along, her mind half focused on her father's cryptic message. Noon. He'd said he would be watching. The atmosphere shifted subtly when Marissa Clay, a senior account exec known for her sharp tongue and designer heels, sidled up beside Rana with a can of Coca-Cola. Oops, Marissa murmured, her voice featherlight with false innocence. She accidentally tipped the can, and a cold splash of soda arced through the air, dousing Rana's blouse and skirt. Gasps rippled around the table, but no one moved to help. Instead, there were tight smiles, awkward chuckles, and a few exchanged glances that said, "Don't make a scene." Rena froze. The cold shock of liquid against her skin warred with the hot flush of humiliation. She could feel the stickiness seeping into the fabric, the acidic bite of the Coke against her skin. The seconds stretched. Reed gave a half laugh. "Accidents happen," he said too smoothly, eyes flicking toward Marissa, who simply shrugged, a smirk playing on her lips. Rena's pulse pounded in her ears. She wanted to scream, to shove the can back into Marissa's manicured hand, to call out the obvious malice in the gesture. But she knew how this game worked. React, and you're the problem. Stay silent, and you're complicit. The weight of her father's expectations bore down on her shoulders, a silent command to endure and observe. So she stood, carefully dabbing at her blouse with a napkin, her hands trembling only slightly. "I'll get cleaned up," she murmured, voice steady despite the knot in her throat. As she turned away, she caught a glimpse of her own reflection in the glass wall, a figure of quiet dignity in a sea of practiced indifference. She carried herself to the bathroom, each step measured, refusing to let them see her falter. Inside, she leaned against the cool marble sink, drawing slow breaths. She dabbed at her clothes with paper towels, though the sticky residue clung stubbornly. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, hands still shaking slightly. The screen displayed a single message. encrypted just as before. Report status. Noon past. Observation complete. Extraction authorized if needed. Discretion essential. St. Her pulse leapt. Shaq had been watching. Somehow, from somewhere, he'd seen the incident unfold. He wasn't going to leave her stranded. The cryptic phrases were a lifeline in the silence of the bathroom. Extraction. Observation. Discretion. The words coiled in her mind like puzzle pieces, hinting at a plan larger than her humiliation. Back in the conference room, laughter resumed, louder now, as if to cover the discomfort of what had just happened. Reed raised his voice, pivoting to safe topics, the upcoming product launch, a minor client victory. Marissa leaned back in her chair, sipping from a fresh can of Coke, her smirk deepening as her eyes flicked toward the door. Rena had exited. The message was clear: stay in your place. But they didn't know who she was. They didn't know what kind of man her father was. The patience he possessed, the resources at his command, and the quiet fury that simmered beneath his controlled surface. Rena's humiliation wasn't the end of the story. It was the spark that would ignite something much larger, something they would never see coming. As she re-entered the room, shoulders squared, she caught Reed's glance, a flicker of irritation masked behind a false smile. She sat down at her spot, expression serene. Inside, her mind raced, connecting her father's message with the patterns she'd observed over the past months. This wasn't just about a spilled Coke. There were deeper currents swirling beneath Hartwell and Breese's polished exterior. Power plays, money laundering, subtle threats. Her father's reach extended into these hidden layers, and now she was caught in the middle. Her phone buzzed again. This time the message was shorter. Stay calm. Observe. Storm coming. The laughter around her seemed distant now, muffled by the roaring pulse of her thoughts. The routine had shattered. Something was coming, and Rena Darnell, daughter of Big Shaq, would be ready. The afternoon sun cast a burnished glow across the Darnell penthouse, its golden rays pooling on the rich wood floors and bouncing off glass walls. The penthouse, perched atop one of Chicago's most exclusive towers, was a realm of quiet power, its sleek lines and understated luxury a reflection of the man who owned it. Shaquille Big Shaq Darnell stood at the edge of the terrace, watching the city pulse beneath him, a silent monarch surveying his empire. The streets below were dotted with yellow cabs and suited figures, oblivious to the drama unfolding behind closed doors. Shaq's expression was unreadable, his jaw tight, his mind sharp as a blade honed over decades of cutthroat business. Inside the penthouse, the air hummed with the soft shuffle of papers and the quiet clicks of a secure laptop. Donovan Cade, Shaq's long-serving assistant, moved with precision, arranging encrypted files and flicking through surveillance feeds. She's holding up, Donovan murmured without turning. They pulled the stunt with the Coca-Cola at lunch. It's confirmed on the office cameras. Marissa Clay and Reed Caldwell both involved. Others silent but complicit. She didn't react, kept her composure. Shaq nodded once, a tight gesture, his fingers brushing his jaw thoughtfully. That's my girl, he murmured, the corners of his mouth tightening, not in a smile but in a grim acknowledgement of her strength. Rena Darnell had grown up in the shadows of wealth and influence. Her childhood was a careful blend of privilege and restraint, each move orchestrated by her father's invisible hand. When she was 10, she remembered standing at the edge of a sprawling estate in upstate New York, watching other children play while her father's bodyguards stood a discreet distance away. She remembered the quiet conversations behind closed doors, the encrypted calls, the whispered warnings. They can't know who you are, Rana. It's not safe. At 14, she'd watched her father shut down a media leak with a quiet phone call, erasing any trace of her existence from public records. Yet despite the security and secrecy, Shaq never coddled her. Instead, he taught her resilience. Power isn't given, it's taken, he'd say, his voice low and firm. But real power is knowing when to let others believe they've won. Her education had been rigorous. Elite private schools, international tutors, immersion in languages, business and ethics. But no amount of preparation could fully steel her against the cold disdain of her coworkers at Hartwell and Breese, or the calculated humiliation she'd endured at that lunch table. In the sterile calm of the women's restroom, Rena stared into the mirror, her reflection a mask of composure. Beneath her neatly pressed blouse and tailored skirt, her skin prickled with the remnants of sticky soda, her heart hammering a dull rhythm of frustration and humiliation. She'd composed a response to her father's message, but hesitated before sending it. Should she escalate, Could she endure more for the sake of keeping her cover? Her thumb hovered over the send button, her mind spinning through the possibilities. When she finally hit send, it wasn't an act of surrender. It was a signal, a calculated decision that acknowledged both her own limits and her father's silent promise. Protection would come, but she had to ask for it. At the penthouse, the alert chimed softly. Shaq's eyes flicked to the screen, reading the message with the faintest narrowing of his gaze. "She's ready," he said quietly, stepping back from the terrace and into the command center of his domain. Donovan's fingers danced over the keyboard, pulling up schematics, financial data, employee records. The storm wasn't coming. It was already gathering. Shaq's voice was low, but resonant. "Activate Phase 1. Lockdown prep. Financial sweep. I want everything they're hiding on my desk within the hour." Donovan nodded, his face impassive. "Understood. Shall I notify our legal team?" Shaq's lips pressed into a thin line. "Not yet. First, I want to see who runs when the lights go out. Then we'll hit them with the full weight." In a hidden room behind the penthouse's study, secured by biometric scanners and multiple encryption layers, Shaq's private intelligence team was already mobilizing. Screens flickered with data streams, offshore accounts, illicit contracts, and confidential HR files. They traced lines of corruption snaking through Hartwell and Breese's polished facade, revealing a rot that extended far beyond a simple workplace prank. This wasn't just about his daughter's humiliation. It was about systemic rot, hidden agendas, and unspoken rules designed to keep certain people powerless. Rena left the restroom with her head high, her steps measured, her pulse steadying. She returned to her desk as if nothing had happened, but her mind was calculating. Every glance, every shift in posture from her coworkers now took on new meaning. She recognized the fear behind their fake smiles, the eagerness to align with power, even at the cost of dignity. The office wasn't just a battleground, it was a game board, and the pieces were already in motion. Shaq's voice, low and steady, filled the secure room. "Donovan, prepare the storm." The words were more than a command. They were a promise. Plans that had been dormant for years were about to be set in motion. Rena's moment of hesitation was over, and now Shaq's hand was on the board. As Donovan activated the encrypted comms, Shaq's mind turned to the broader implications. This wasn't just about one company or one daughter. It was about sending a message to the industry, to the power brokers who thought they could toy with people's lives, to the quiet observers who believed money was the only shield. His reputation as a ruthless but fair titan would be reinforced, but more than that, he would remind them all that some lines couldn't be crossed. In the shadows of the penthouse, the plan crystallized. Financial traps were laid, legal pitfalls identified, and exit strategies for key players mapped out with chilling precision. The pieces fell into place not with chaos, but with the cold certainty of a master strategist. Meanwhile, back at the office, Rena's phone buzzed softly. She glanced down, a message appearing on her encrypted app. It was simple, sharp, and unambiguous. Observation complete. Extraction authorized. Discretion essential. Her lips curved into a faint smile, not of triumph, but of resolve. The message wasn't just a signal that help was on its way. It was a reminder of her own role in this unfolding drama. She wasn't a victim. She was her father's daughter, trained in the art of quiet power and relentless justice. And as the sun dipped lower over the Chicago skyline, casting long shadows across both the penthouse and the office below, the air seemed to vibrate with the tension of a storm about to break. The hidden billionaire had made his move, and there was no turning back. In the polished conference room of Hartwell and Breese, the air was thick with pretense. The blinds were drawn just enough to keep out the glare of the afternoon sun, casting the room in a muted haze. Preston Grange, the firm's regional director, stood at the head of the long table, his tailored suit perfectly crisp, his smile tight as a noose. "Let's not blow things out of proportion," he said, his tone smooth as glass but carrying an edge sharp enough to cut. The small group of managers and select staff murmured their agreement, heads nodding in a practiced rhythm. Rena sat at the far end of the table, her expression carefully composed, her eyes cool. Preston's gaze flicked toward her, but only briefly. "This morning's incident was unfortunate, but accidents happen," he continued, his voice laden with calculated indifference. "Let's focus on productivity and moving forward. We're a team, after all." The phrase hung in the air, brittle and insincere. Rena felt the weight of unspoken accusations pressing against her from all sides. The subtle shift of eyes and posture. The message was clear: don't make waves. She kept her voice steady, though her hands were clenched in her lap. "I'm sure you'll handle it appropriately," she said quietly, her tone neutral, but Preston's jaw tightened, a flicker of irritation breaking through his mask. As the meeting dissolved into meaningless platitudes, Rena gathered her things and left the room, her mind already turning. The isolation she felt was heavier now, not just from the incident itself but from the collective decision to minimize it. Yet something had shifted beneath the surface. She caught fleeting glances of discomfort in a few co-workers' eyes, nervous glances toward closed office doors, conversations that halted abruptly as she passed. There was fear there, a subtle tightening of control, and it wasn't just about her. Across town, in the discreet hum of Shaq's penthouse, Donovan Cade was orchestrating a quiet storm. Behind encrypted servers and secure lines, legal notices were drafted with meticulous precision, each word a calculated strike designed to unbalance and expose. Financial audits were commissioned under the guise of routine compliance, but each was a sharpened blade aimed at the firm's hidden vulnerabilities. Donovan moved through the tasks with a surgeon's focus, his voice low as he murmured into a secured phone line. "Begin initial probe into offshore holdings. I want tax irregularities, payout discrepancies, any scent of fraud, quiet but thorough. We'll hit them where it hurts." Shaq, seated in his private study, watched the data unfold on multiple screens, his expression impassive but his mind calculating every angle. The Coca-Cola incident was merely the tip of a much darker iceberg, and his sources were uncovering layers of corruption embedded deep within the firm's polished exterior. Wage theft hidden beneath creative accounting, discriminatory practices masked as policy, and networks of illegal contracts that stretched far beyond the office walls. Shaq's voice cut through the quiet. "Donovan, don't just prepare for impact. I want their entire structure mapped out. We'll decide who stands and who falls." At Hartwell and Breese, Rena sensed the shift, like a change in barometric pressure. Where there had been dismissive condescension, there was now a creeping uncertainty. Coworkers who had once ignored her now offered tight smiles. A few even murmured insincere apologies about the incident, but others, like Marissa Clay, were sharpening their edges, whispering with renewed hostility in corners, eyes gleaming with thinly veiled malice. Rena recognized the pattern, the calm before the eruption, when power players circled, ready to strike at perceived weakness. In a dim corner of the office, she overheard snippets of conversation, whispers about sudden audits, unexplained freezes on certain accounts, and a low buzz of panic from middle management. Someone mentioned seeing a man in a dark suit outside the building, murmuring to security, and another spoke of encrypted emails disappearing overnight. Rena kept her face neutral, but inside a cold certainty settled. Her father was pulling strings, but this wasn't reckless retribution. It was strategy, precision, and control. As Donovan's team intensified their maneuvers, cryptic legal notices began to land on Preston Grange's desk, thinly veiled demands for records. Compliance checks and warnings of pending investigations arrived in quiet succession. Preston's calm facade cracked just enough to betray unease as he retreated behind closed doors, his assistant scurrying with stacks of documents. Back in the penthouse, Donovan updated Shaq with quiet efficiency. "They're scrambling. Legal's rattled. We'll have actionable data within 24 hours. It's clean, untraceable, but they'll feel the pressure." Shaq's nod was subtle, his gaze fixed on the slow unraveling of the firm's defenses. "Let them feel it," he said softly. "I want them off balance when we deliver the next move." As the day slid into late afternoon, Rena noticed subtle changes in her surroundings. Certain coworkers disappeared early, while others lingered near their desks, feigning productivity but their eyes flicking nervously toward closed office doors. Marissa's smirk faltered when she caught Rena's calm, measured gaze. Even Preston, usually aloof and untouchable, seemed tense, his movements clipped and his voice sharper than usual during a hastily convened update meeting that resolved nothing. Then, just as the office settled into an uneasy lull, a ripple of disturbance spread from the reception desk. A delivery man in a plain uniform, face impassive, stepped into the lobby and handed a thick envelope to the receptionist. No explanation, no signature, just a single line written in bold ink across the front. "Prepare for impact." The receptionist's hands trembled as she set the envelope on Preston's desk, her face pale. Preston, emerging from his office with forced calm, opened it under the watchful eyes of his remaining staff. His face blanched as he read, the blood draining from his features. Rena, standing at her desk, watched the subtle panic spread through the room like cracks spidering across glass. The storm wasn't coming. It had arrived. And Rena Darnell, silent but resolute, understood now that her father's reach extended far beyond whispers and encrypted messages. This was more than retribution for a spilled drink. It was a calculated, devastating strike against a structure built on quiet corruption and fragile power. The real game had begun. Morning broke over Chicago. But at Hartwell and Breese, the atmosphere was far from ordinary. The usual murmur of keyboards and phone calls was replaced by a thick, expectant silence. Rena Darnell stepped off the elevator, her senses attuned to every subtle shift. Security guards, unfamiliar faces in tailored black suits, lingered near the lobby entrance. The receptionist, usually composed, appeared pale and tense, her fingers trembling as she arranged papers on her desk. Rena moved through the lobby with steady, measured steps, her heart tightening with a quiet certainty. Her father's moves had reached the building's core. Before she could reach her desk, a low murmur rippled through the staff. From the glass-encased conference room emerged a woman who commanded instant attention. Victoria Cross, Shaq's lead legal strategist, was a presence few could ignore. Her sharply tailored charcoal suit, crisp white shirt, and calculated gaze radiated quiet authority. She held a stack of thick files and flanked by two silent assistants. She approached the reception desk. "Seal the exits," Victoria instructed, her tone cool but resolute. The receptionist's eyes widened in disbelief. "Seal them now," Victoria repeated, a quiet force behind her words. Within moments, the subtle hum of locking mechanisms echoed through the building. Magnetic locks engaged at every door, security protocols that were rarely tested now executed with silent precision. Staff exchanged anxious glances as phones were discreetly collected and placed into secure containers by suited personnel. Whispers rose like nervous smoke. "What's happening? Why can't we leave? This isn't legal, is it?" Rena stood by the window, her reflection merging with the cityscape beyond, and felt the tension tighten around her like a coiled spring. Victoria's voice cut through the growing murmurs. "You are all to remain in place until instructed. Each department will be called for individual review. This is an internal compliance investigation, authorized by the board. Cooperation is expected." Her words, though measured, carried the weight of inevitability. Panic began to bloom in hushed exchanges and darting eyes. Managers who had once wielded quiet power now looked uncertain, their composure fraying at the edges. Rena was summoned first. She followed a suited assistant into a side conference room, repurposed into a makeshift investigation hub. Inside, the air was cool, the lighting clinical. A long table stood at the center, with Victoria seated at its head, her files open like evidence waiting to be examined. "Miss Darnell," Victoria greeted her with a nod, though her eyes betrayed an awareness of who Rena truly was. "Please confirm your role and recent interactions with management regarding last week's incident." Rena's voice was steady. "Project coordinator. I reported an incident of harassment to my supervisor. The incident was dismissed." Victoria's pen moved smoothly over her notes, her expression unreadable. "Thank you. That will be all for now." The interview lasted only minutes, yet the weight of it lingered as Rena stepped back into the main office. Now the atmosphere was heavier, denser with dread. One by one, departments were summoned. Staff whispered urgently, trying to piece together what was unfolding. Rumors swirled. Financial audits, claims of harassment, hidden misconduct. The senior managers were visibly rattled. Rena watched from her vantage point as Preston Grange was called into the conference room. His normally composed stride was clipped, his shoulders stiff. When he emerged 20 minutes later, his face was ashen, his hands trembling. Marissa Clay was next, her confident smirk faltering under the intense scrutiny of the legal team. The assistants, silent but efficient, documented every word, every expression, every stammered denial. As the hours dragged on, the office transformed into a hive of quiet panic. Whispered accusations turned into open suspicions. Long-standing alliances crumbled as employees realized their power had evaporated in the face of legal precision. Some attempted to leave early, only to find the exits firmly sealed. Their protests met with calm, unyielding refusals. Phones remained locked away, severing lines of escape and communication. Rena remained still, observing the implosion of the office hierarchy, the way those who had dismissed her now bent under pressure. Through it all, Victoria Cross maintained an air of detached efficiency. Each interview, each record requested, each pointed question was part of a meticulously crafted strategy. There were no raised voices, no overt threats, only the quiet, relentless unraveling of lies. The staff soon realized that resistance was futile, that the balance of power had irrevocably shifted. Rena's mind spun as she pieced together the implications. Her father's hand was in every move, precise and deliberate. This was no mere reaction to her humiliation. It was a systematic dismantling of a corrupt structure. The Coca-Cola incident had been the spark, but Shaq's response was a calculated inferno that revealed the firm's hidden rot. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the office, the tension thickened. Then, from the building's intercom system, a voice reverberated through every corner. It was deep, measured, and unmistakable. "This is Shaquille Darnell. The reckoning has begun." A collective shiver ran through the staff. Rena, standing by her desk, felt a surge of conflicted emotions, vindication, apprehension, and a deep, undeniable sense of change. The man whose presence had loomed over her life had finally stepped into the light, not with force, but with the quiet, unassailable power of justice. The locked doors, the silent phones, the methodical questioning, all were part of a plan larger than any of them had imagined. And as her father's voice echoed through the quiet corridors, it was clear to everyone that the days of impunity were over. The reckoning had not just begun, it was already here. The double doors of the boardroom swung open, with a quiet, deliberate force. Inside, the executive team of Hartwell and Breeze had gathered, their faces tense, papers and devices scattered across the long table. Whispers stilled into a heavy silence as Shaquille "Big Shaq" Darnell entered, his presence shifting the atmosphere like the weight of a thundercloud. His steps were slow, deliberate, but each echoed with unspoken power. He wore a charcoal suit, understated yet commanding, his expression carved from stone. His gaze swept the room, lingering just long enough to catch the twitch of a nervous hand here, the darting glance of guilt there. Victoria Cross followed closely behind him, her folders of evidence neatly stacked, while Donovan Cade remained by the door, his posture as still and unreadable as ever. The executives, Preston Grange, Marissa Clay, and others, looked between each other, searching for a foothold of control, but it was clear they were outmaneuvered. Shaq took his place at the head of the table, a spot usually reserved for Preston, whose lips thinned but voice failed to find the right protest. Shaq's voice, low and steady, cut through the thick air. "We've wasted enough time," he said. "Let's lay it all out." His hand gestured toward Victoria, who opened her files with crisp precision. Victoria's voice was cool, her cadence deliberate. "We have evidence of systemic wage theft, discriminatory hiring practices, tax fraud, and obstruction of justice, some of which involve this very room." She laid down photographs of signed contracts, bank statements showing off-the-books payments, and testimonies from whistleblowers. The documents painted a picture of rot carefully hidden beneath the company's polished veneer. Murmurs broke out, some rising to protests, but Shaq raised a hand, silencing them with a glance. Then came the twist, sharp and cutting. "You've all been complicit," Shaq said, his voice soft but with an undercurrent of cold steel. "But there's one among you who didn't just stand by, one who fueled the fire for personal gain." His eyes locked onto a man seated midway down the table. Jeff Calder, Rena's longtime coworker, flinched as every eye turned toward him. His carefully constructed facade wavered under the weight of revelation. Victoria laid a slim folder before Jeff. Inside were printouts of encrypted communications, bank transactions, and evidence of leaks. "Jeff Calder has been feeding confidential information to outside competitors for years," she said calmly. "He sold trade secrets, manipulated data to cause internal failures, and even orchestrated targeted harassment campaigns, including the incident with the Coca-Cola." Gasps rippled through the room. Rena, standing near the entrance, felt a sick twist in her stomach. She'd trusted Jeff, shared frustrations, even sought his advice when things turned cold at the office. His betrayal wasn't just a stab in the back. It was a meticulously planned strike against her and everything she'd fought to protect. Jeff's expression hardened as denial flickered across his features, but Victoria's next words cut him off. "Don't bother. We have recorded confessions, witness testimonies, and financial traces leading directly to you. You've played both sides for profit and power." She let the weight of the evidence hang heavy in the air before adding, "But it wasn't just about money, was it?" Shaq's gaze turned razor sharp, his voice low, almost a growl. It was personal. About her mother. The room froze. Rena's pulse leapt, confusion and dread mingling in her chest. "What do you mean?" she whispered. But Jeff's shoulders sagged, his head lowering in defeat. "Your mother and I," Jeff said hoarsely. The words pulled from his throat like a confession from a man on the gallows. "We were together. Before she married him." He gestured helplessly toward Shaq, his tone thick with bitterness. "She chose him over me. He took everything. I was nothing. And when she died, I blamed him. I blamed both of you." Rena's breath caught. The betrayal ran deeper than corporate sabotage. It was rooted in personal vendetta, years of bitterness twisted into silent sabotage. Jeff's hands trembled as he continued. "I couldn't touch him. But you were within reach, so I fed them just enough to keep the fires burning. To make you suffer." The boardroom fell into a stunned silence, the weight of Jeff's revelation suffocating. Preston tried to bluster, attempting to shift blame back to Jeff alone. But Shaq's voice cut through his protests like a blade. "Every one of you played a part. You may not have held the match, but you stood by while the fire was set." His eyes swept over the room, daring anyone to challenge his authority. None did. Victoria's voice regained control. "Legal notices are being delivered. The investigation will proceed, and each of you will have a chance to explain yourselves, publicly or privately. But the rot stops here." Shaq rose, his towering presence forcing everyone's gaze upward. "This isn't about vengeance," he said, his voice low but firm. "This is about justice, about cleaning house, and ensuring that no one uses power to silence or destroy others for personal gain." Rena, her emotions roiling beneath a veneer of composure, realized in that moment just how far her father was willing to go. Not just to protect her, but to restore a balance corrupted long before she arrived at Hartwell and Breese. The tangled lines of betrayal, ambition and personal vendetta were finally laid bare. Jeff was escorted from the room by Victoria's assistants, his protest hollow, his shoulders hunched in defeat. The remaining executives sat in stunned silence, the weight of their complicity pressing down like a vice. As Shaq turned toward the door, he paused. "The reckoning isn't over," he said quietly, his voice echoing in the hushed boardroom. "This is just the beginning." And with that, he and his team left, leaving behind a room heavy with shattered illusions, broken power plays, and the haunting knowledge that their actions had been exposed to the light. The boardroom door thudded closed behind Shaq and his team, sealing in the suffocating air of betrayal and exposed secrets. But the tremors of truth rippled beyond those walls, reaching into every corner of Hartwell and Breese's gleaming facade. In the hours that followed, revelations emerged with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. Department after department faced scrutiny under Shaq's calculated gaze, and what surfaced was far uglier than even Rena could have imagined. Documents long buried were unearthed, revealing a systemic pattern of discriminatory hiring practices. Qualified candidates denied opportunities under the guise of culture fit. Entire projects rerouted to favor select teams with unspoken affiliations, and performance reviews that masked prejudice under a veneer of objectivity. Hidden ledgers surfaced, detailing off-the-books payments, shell contracts, and illegal kickbacks that funneled money through shadow companies, skimming profits and silencing potential whistleblowers. The rot was not isolated, it was woven into the firm's very foundation. Rena stood at the periphery, absorbing each revelation with a mix of disbelief and grim acceptance. The weight of it settled on her shoulders, not just the betrayal by her colleagues, but the realization that she herself had been naive. She had believed in merit, in quiet diligence, in fairness being rewarded. But the truth was starker. These halls she had tried so hard to blend into were built on manipulation, secrets, and silent complicity. She found herself questioning not just the people around her but the assumptions she had clung to for so long. In a quiet alcove near the executive suites, Donovan Cade appeared with a thin, leather-bound folder. His movements were precise, his face unreadable as he approached Shaq, who was surveying the data splayed across a makeshift war table. Donovan's voice, low but carrying an edge of triumph, broke the silence. "We found it. The founder's will, sealed, forgotten in a private archive, hidden but legal." He handed the folder to Shaq, who opened it with deliberate care. Inside was a document that carried the weight of finality, a clause transferring operational control of Hartwell and Breese to Shaq under specific conditions that had now been fulfilled. Rena's breath caught as she read over her father's shoulder. The signature was unmistakable, the terms binding. This wasn't just a hostile takeover, it was a meticulously planned reclamation of power, leveraging forgotten promises and legal intricacies that only a mind as methodical as Shaq's could exploit. Preston Grange, catching sight of the document from across the room, lunged forward, his voice cracking with desperation. "This is a setup. That document, where did you even find it? It's not valid." His protest echoed hollowly in the tense room, but Shaq's gaze cut through the noise like a blade. "It's valid," he said quietly. "You just didn't think anyone would look deep enough to find it." As Preston's protest escalated into frantic gesturing, security moved into the room, called hastily by panicked staff clinging to the last vestiges of control. The doors slammed open, and uniformed guards stepped forward, hands poised near holsters but restrained by the silent authority radiating from Shaq's team. Donovan's voice, low and unhurried, addressed them. "Stand down. Your services are no longer required." His tone carried the weight of authority, backed by the legal power contained in the sealed document, now resting in Shaq's hands. The guards hesitated, glancing between the executives and Shaq's impassive team, then slowly withdrew, leaving the room thick with an air of uneasy surrender. Rena's gaze moved from her father to Donovan, the pieces falling into place. This wasn't just a tactical victory. It was a masterclass in patience and control. Her father hadn't simply reacted to the Coca-Cola incident. He had anticipated resistance, mapped out counterplays, and waited for the perfect moment to strike. And while she felt a flicker of admiration for his strategic brilliance, it was tempered by an unsettling recognition of the ruthlessness required to pull it off. As the legal transfer of power was finalized, Marissa Clay's composure cracked. Her voice, once sharp and mocking, now trembled with desperation. "We can negotiate," she pleaded, her carefully applied mask of confidence slipping. "This doesn't have to be the end. We can make arrangements. We can work together." Shaq's response was quiet, but final. "You had your chance. Now the choice is simple. Cooperate or face the consequences." The mask is off. The world will see Hartwell and Brees for what it truly is. His words settled over the room like a gavel striking down, leaving no room for rebuttal. Rena felt a surge of conflicted pride and discomfort. Her father's unflinching command, the way he dismantled a corrupt system with precision and without a trace of panic, was awe-inspiring. But it also forced her to confront uncomfortable truths, not just about the firm, but about herself. She had underestimated him, assuming his power was confined to boardrooms and financial maneuvers. In truth, his reach extended into shadows she hadn't known existed. His strategies crafted not just to win, but to reshape the battlefield entirely. As the last of the dissenters fell silent, and the remaining staff realized resistance was futile, Rena stepped forward, her voice steady despite the turmoil within. "What happens now?" she asked, her words cutting through the hushed room. Shaq turned to her, his expression unreadable, but his voice softened. "Now, we rebuild, cleanly, honestly, and we make sure no one forgets how close they came to falling into the abyss." His gaze swept the room, holding each person in its grip. "But know this, the mask is off, the games are over." The air thickened with resignation and reluctant acceptance. Rena felt the weight of the moment press against her, a tide of clarity and challenge. This wasn't just a victory for her father, it was an invitation for her to step into the light, to carry forward the lessons of strategy, resilience, and calculated force. And as the shadows of deceit lifted, the true face of power was finally revealed. The once bustling halls of Hartwell and Brees fell into a suffocating quiet, as the full weight of Shaq's strategic storm settled over the company. One by one, employees were ushered through the glass doors, no longer locked, but heavy with unspoken dismissal. The air hung thick with resignation and shame, the echo of hurried footsteps and the rustle of hastily packed boxes marking their departure. The quiet was not just physical, it was psychological, the hollow realization that the old order was shattered beyond repair. Rena Darnell stood near the main entrance, her posture steady but her mind awash with conflicting emotions. She watched as former colleagues filed past her, some avoiding eye contact, others offering mumbled apologies or hollow excuses. Even Marissa Clay, whose arrogance had once seemed unbreakable, exited with her designer bag clutched tightly, her once imperious gaze clouded with fear. Preston Grange disappeared without a word, his tailored suit rumpled, his face ashen. Their departure wasn't marked by resistance or protests, but by a collective, quiet collapse. Behind Rena, a small knot of employees remained, those who had chosen to stay, either out of loyalty, pragmatism, or perhaps because they believed in the possibility of redemption. They were few but determined, their faces etched with the weight of what lay ahead. Rena felt an unexpected surge of responsibility, knowing that her decisions would shape the company's future. Across the lobby, Shaq observed the exodus with an impassive gaze. He stood with his arms folded, his stance a quiet declaration of authority. But there was no gloating in his expression. His actions had never been about vengeance or spectacle. They were about justice, about ensuring his daughter's safety and dignity, and about pulling back the curtain on a corrupt system that had thrived on silence and complicity. Donovan Cade appeared at Shaq's side, his voice low and measured. The transition is underway. Those remaining have been briefed on restructuring. Legal's handling the documentation. Everything's proceeding as you instructed. Shaq nodded once, his gaze lingering on Rena. Good, he murmured. She'll need a team she can trust. Rena turned, meeting her father's eyes, and for the first time since the ordeal began, she felt a tentative bridge forming between them, a shared understanding that transcended their differences. He hadn't stepped in just as a billionaire wielding power, but as a father drawing a line against injustice. She realized now that his silence over the years had been strategic, his apparent distance a calculated shield against threats both seen and unseen. The remaining employees gathered near Rena, their murmured conversations, hinting at cautious optimism. Among them was Clara Wynne, a junior strategist with a sharp mind and a quiet resilience, and Marcus Bell, an operations lead known for his unwavering ethics. They stood with her not out of necessity, but because they saw in her a leader who could rebuild what had been broken. The hours stretched into the early evening, the sun casting long shadows across the marble floors. As the last of the resignations were processed, Shaq's phone vibrated quietly. He pulled it from his pocket, his expression unreadable as he skimmed an encrypted message. His brow furrowed slightly, a flicker of calculation passing over his features. Donovan, noticing, leaned closer. Something else, he murmured. Shaq's reply was quiet but firm. A wider net than we thought. There's another layer possibly connected to rival firms. This wasn't just internal corruption. It's part of a bigger game. He tucked the phone away, his face settling into a mask of calm control. But Rena noticed the shift, the subtle tightening of his jaw, the measured stillness in his stance. Donovan's response was equally measured. Do we act on it now? Shaq's gaze lingered on Rena, then swept across the skeleton crew, waiting patiently for instructions. Not yet, he said. Let's finish what we started here. Then we'll deal with the next challenge. Rena felt a tremor of unease ripple through her, tempered by a growing determination. The hint of a larger conspiracy, whispered through encrypted messages and hidden alliances, added a new layer of complexity to the already tangled web. But for now, the focus was clear. The company needed to be rebuilt, not as a monument to old power structures, but as a testament to resilience, integrity, and unflinching resolve. As the doors finally closed on the departing masses, leaving only the determined few behind, Rena squared her shoulders. She turned to Clara, Marcus, and the others, her voice clear and unwavering. We rebuild, cleanly, from the ground up. No shortcuts, no compromises. Her words, simple but decisive, resonated through the quiet space, drawing nods of agreement from those gathered. Shaq watched her, his expression softening for a fraction of a second. He didn't say a word, but in that silence, Rena understood his message. This was her moment to lead, to carry forward not just his legacy, but her own vision. The exodus was complete, but the real journey was just beginning. The city skyline glittered under the evening sky as Rena Darnell stood at the head of the newly restructured Hartwell and Breese. The air was crisp, humming with quiet anticipation. Her name was no longer hidden behind codes or whispered introductions. It was displayed proudly on the executive roster, etched in the legal documents that confirmed her as the new CEO. This wasn't just a title. It was a declaration. Rena wasn't merely a survivor of the company's collapse. She was its future. Across the city, reporters scrambled to interpret Shaq's public statement, delivered with his characteristic mix of calm authority and unmistakable power. I protect mine, he had said, the words broadcast live to a global audience. And I protect those who deserve a second chance. The declaration wasn't just a nod to his daughter's leadership. It was a warning to rivals, to corrupt executives, and to anyone who thought the old ways could prevail. It signaled a shift in how power would be wielded, strategic, unapologetic, and driven by a personal code of justice. Within Hartwell and Breese, The atmosphere was cautiously hopeful. Former employees, once complicit in the firm's darkest practices, hesitated at the periphery of the company's rebirth. Some, driven by guilt or desperation, stepped forward with crucial information about hidden accounts, shadow contracts, and financial records previously thought destroyed. Their motives were mixed, but Rena chose to focus on the opportunity they presented. "If you want redemption," she told them, her voice steady but firm, "it comes through truth and accountability. There are no shortcuts this time." The decision to incorporate their insights wasn't made lightly. Each piece of information was vetted by Donovan Cade's team, dissected with the precision that had become a signature of Shaq's inner circle. Rena reviewed the reports herself, her focus unwavering as she mapped out a strategy to stabilize the company while rooting out the remaining traces of corruption. Her approach was methodical, balancing firm resolve with a genuine willingness to rebuild trust where possible. But the path forward wasn't smooth. Anonymous messages began to surface, emails laced with veiled threats, envelopes slid under her office door containing cryptic warnings. One message, scrawled in looping handwriting on a torn scrap of paper, read, "You think you've won, but you're just another pawn." Another arrived electronically, encrypted but decipherable by Donovan's team. It contained a single chilling phrase, "Watch your back, Darnell." Rena's pulse quickened, but she refused to let fear dictate her actions. Instead, she doubled security measures, consulted with Shaq and Donovan, and kept her team close. The threats hinted at deeper currents, alliances that might still lurk beneath the surface, individuals unwilling to accept the new order. Yet she faced them not with panic but with a quiet, steely determination inherited from her father. Shaq's presence, though less visible, loomed large over the proceedings. He moved behind the scenes, consulting with legal teams, securing alliances with key stakeholders, and ensuring that Rena's ascent was both legitimate and unassailable. His public statement had served its purpose, but his real work was in reinforcing the structural integrity of the company under his daughter's leadership. Meanwhile, Rena found herself navigating a delicate balance. She needed to assert her authority, to prove that her leadership was more than symbolic. Yet she also needed to foster a culture of transparency, to offer a chance at redemption for those willing to earn it. Her meetings with former employees were marked by a mix of caution and candor. Some approached her with genuine remorse, while others offered information with a transactional coldness that made her skin crawl. But Rena took it all in stride, her focus sharp and unwavering. Donovan's reports continued to unearth threads of deception, small contracts that fed into larger schemes, personnel records that hinted at deeper connections to rival firms. Each revelation added a layer of complexity, but Rena approached them with the same quiet resolve that had carried her through the chaos. "We'll handle it," she told Donovan after a particularly unsettling discovery, "piece by piece, no matter how long it takes." Despite the mounting challenges, there were moments of unexpected grace. Clara Wynne and Marcus Bell, part of the loyal skeleton crew who had stayed during the company's darkest hours, emerged as capable allies. Clara's sharp analytical mind and Marcus's grounded pragmatism provided Rena with invaluable support. Together they crafted a blueprint for the company's reconstruction, one that prioritized integrity, innovation, and a culture of respect. As the weeks passed, the company's transformation began to take shape. New protocols were established, key hires made, and compliance measures tightened. The old guard was gone, their shadows replaced by a cautious optimism that, while fragile, was undeniably present. Rena's leadership, tested by adversity and bolstered by determination, began to gain recognition not just within the company, but across the industry. Yet the lingering threats reminded her that the battle wasn't over. Late one evening, as she stood by her office window, overlooking the city, her phone buzzed with a secure message from Donovan. The content was brief, but its implications were vast. Confirmed link to rival firms, external pressure likely to escalate, preparing countermeasures. Rena's fingers tightened around the device, but she didn't waver. The threats weren't new, they were just the next move in a game she was now determined to play to the end. She straightened her shoulders, her gaze steady as the city lights shimmered below. This was her company now, her fight, and she wouldn't back down. The late-night hum of Chicago buzzed faintly through the thick glass of Rena Darnell's corner office. The city sparkled beneath her, a glittering expanse of possibility and danger. She stood with her arms crossed, her mind racing as she absorbed the latest revelations delivered by Donovan Cade's secure report. The Coca-Cola incident, the petty, humiliating gesture that had ignited this storm, wasn't a random act of cruelty. It was a calculated warning, A signal of deeper corruption threaded through the company's foundations. Shaq's voice, low and unhurried, resonated from the speakerphone as he joined the midnight strategy call. They were sending a message, he said, his tone devoid of surprise. Not just to her, but to me. They knew who she was, what she represented. They wanted her out, to keep the old structure intact. Rena listened, her pulse steady but her mind sharp. It made sense now, the sudden shift in her co-workers' attitudes, the brazen nature of the Coke incident, and the rapid unraveling of their complicity when pressed. It wasn't just about her. It was about silencing a threat before it could take root. Donovan's voice cut in, crisp and decisive. We've mapped connections between Jeff Calder and external firms, specifically competitors, and certain political figures. This wasn't isolated espionage. It's industrial sabotage, coordinated, funded. Calder was just the local lever. The weight of the words settled heavy in the room. Rena inhaled slowly, absorbing the magnitude of what they were facing. This wasn't just corporate greed or personal vendetta. It was a network, a web of hidden deals, political influence, and targeted destabilization. Across town, Shaq leaned back in his leather chair, his mind turning over the pieces like a master strategist, assembling a final, devastating move. They thought they could play us, he murmured. They underestimated how far we'd dig, how much we'd be willing to expose. He straightened, his voice sharpening with quiet resolve. Donovan, prepare the files for federal submission. Full disclosure, no redactions. If they want war, we'll bring it to the steps of every agency with a mandate to investigate. Rena's breath caught. It was a bold move, one that risked backlash from powerful entities unaccustomed to being challenged. But she recognized the necessity. If they let this network survive, it would simply regroup, adapt, and retaliate in the shadows. The only way to break the cycle was to drag the truth into the light, no matter the cost. In the following days, the tension mounted like an invisible noose tightening around the company. Subpoenas were prepared, confidential documents compiled, and legal teams briefed. Rena maintained her calm, navigating high-stakes meetings with a poise that belied the storm swirling just beneath the surface. Whispers followed her through the halls, some laced with admiration, others with thinly veiled resentment. She understood the risks. She'd stepped into a power vacuum that many had fought to maintain, and now she was challenging forces far larger than the walls of Hartwell and Brees. Anonymous threats escalated, the warnings growing bolder, hinting at personal consequences if the files were submitted. But Rena remained resolute, drawing strength from her father's unwavering support, and the loyal core team that had stood by her side. They weren't just fighting for the company, they were fighting for integrity, for justice, for the right to lead without fear of hidden knives. The climax came when Shaq's team delivered the compiled evidence to federal authorities. The media exploded with reports of sweeping investigations, implicating not just rival firms, but also sitting politicians, regulatory bodies and financial institutions that had turned a blind eye. The revelations painted a damning portrait of an ecosystem built on bribery, backroom deals, and systemic discrimination. Headlines screamed of betrayal and corruption, while social media buzzed with a mixture of outrage and vindication. Rena stood at the helm of Hartwell and Brees during this maelstrom, her presence a steadying force amid chaos. Investors, initially wary, began to recognize the shift. Under her leadership, the company wasn't just surviving, it was rising. Her insistence on transparency, fair practices, and accountability sent a message that resonated far beyond the boardroom. The stock, once plummeting in the wake of scandal, soared as public confidence surged. Clients returned, drawn by the firm's commitment to integrity, and new partnerships emerged from unexpected quarters. In a quiet moment amid the media frenzy, Rena received a final encrypted message from Donovan. They've gone silent. Their networks are crumbling. The retaliation plans are collapsing under public scrutiny. We've won for now. Relief mingled with a deep, abiding weariness. She knew the game wasn't over. Those who thrived in shadows would adapt, would find new ways to exert influence. But for now, the balance of power had shifted. That evening, standing by the window of her office as the city pulsed beneath her, Rena reflected on the journey. The betrayal, the revelations, the quiet unraveling of facades. It had all led to this moment. She wasn't naive enough to believe the fight was over, but she was prepared to lead, to protect what mattered, and to face whatever storms came next. Behind her, Shaq's voice was quiet but resolute. As he stepped into the room, "You did good, kid," he said. There was no prideful gloating, No boastful triumph, just a simple acknowledgement of the battle fought and won. Rena turned to him, her gaze steady, her voice calm. "It's not over," she said softly, "but we're ready." And as father and daughter stood side by side, overlooking the city that had tried to break them, the glow of victory was tempered by the knowledge that the next move was theirs to make, and this time it would be on their terms. The dawn painted the Chicago skyline in strokes of gold and rose, the light chasing away the shadows of a long, turbulent night. From the corner office that now bore her name, Rena Darnell watched the sunrise with a quiet, contemplative gaze. The city below seemed transformed, not because it had changed, but because she had, no longer the hidden daughter of Shaquille Darnell. Rena had stepped fully into her identity, a bold, capable leader standing atop the remnants of a corrupt empire she had helped dismantle. The journey had been long and fraught with betrayal, but it had also forged her into someone stronger, someone unafraid to claim her place in the world. The office, once a space of whispers and hidden agendas, now hummed with a quiet determination. The skeleton crew that had chosen to stay through the storm had become the foundation of a new, leaner, and more transparent company. Each step of the restructuring reflected Rena's vision, one rooted in accountability, fairness, and a determination to shatter the old ways that had allowed corruption to thrive. Clara Wynne and Marcus Bell were now her closest allies, their insights and dedication invaluable in this new chapter. Together they were crafting not just a company but a statement that integrity could and would win. Across the city, Shaq observed from a distance. His public role diminished but his influence still deeply felt. The media painted him as a reclusive figure, a billionaire who had upended the status quo, only to quietly retreat from the limelight. But those close to him knew the truth. This was not retreat, it was strategy. He had never been one to crave the spotlight. His power came from his ability to maneuver unseen, to pull strings while letting others take the credit. In Rena he saw not just his successor, but the evolution of his legacy. She was the visible face of a new era, one that carried the lessons he had instilled in her through silent years of mentorship. Rena often reflected on those lessons now. Her father's seemingly ruthless decisions were, in truth, acts of quiet protection. His calculated moves, his willingness to let her face adversity, were never about abandonment. They were about preparation. Each challenge had been a lesson, each setback a test of her resilience and resolve. Standing at the helm of Hartwell and Breeze, she understood that now more than ever, the weight of leadership wasn't just about managing people or profits. It was about navigating the treacherous waters of power with clarity, integrity, and unflinching resolve. The company's revival was not without challenges. External pressures lingered, remnants of the larger network that had been exposed. Though the federal investigations had dismantled much of the conspiracy, whispers of lingering allies and unseen forces persisted. Rena remained vigilant, knowing that the real test was not in winning a battle, but in holding the ground that had been claimed. Her strategies balanced transparency with caution, her decisions deliberate and measured. She knew that one misstep could invite chaos, but she refused to let fear dictate her action. As the sun climbed higher, casting a warm glow over the city, Rena allowed herself a rare moment of quiet reflection. The journey from a hidden heiress to a public leader had been marked by personal losses, painful revelations, and moments of profound doubt. Yet through it all, she had remained true to herself and to the principles instilled by her father. She had discovered her own strength, her own voice, and had earned the respect of those who mattered. The company's soaring stock value was not just a financial victory. It was a testament to resilience, to the idea that justice and integrity could rebuild even the most broken structures. Shaq's voice echoed in her mind, a reminder of the man who had shaped her path. He had once said, "Power is not just about taking, it's about knowing when to let go." And now he had stepped back, leaving the stage to her, confident that she was ready to lead. His legacy was not in titles or headlines, but in the quiet, steady force of a protector who had ensured that his daughter was prepared for whatever lay ahead. The soft chime of an encrypted message broke her reverie. Rena reached for her phone, her pulse steady but her mind sharpening as she opened the secure communication. The message was brief, the text stark against the dark screen. "The real game has just begun." Her breath caught, not in fear, but in recognition. The threat had never truly vanished. It had only retreated, waiting for an opportunity to strike again. But this time, she was ready. She had faced betrayal and emerged stronger. She had confronted hidden adversaries and dismantled their power. Now she understood that leadership was not a destination, but a perpetual journey through shifting landscapes of loyalty, ambition, and unseen forces. Rena set the phone down, her gaze lifting once more to the horizon. The city stretched before her, alive with potential and danger. But this time she faced it not as a hidden figure, but as a leader in her own right. The legacy her father had begun was hers to carry forward, not as a burden, but as a banner. And with each decision, each calculated move, she would carve a path not just for herself, but for those who believed in a future built on integrity and strength. The sun rose higher, bathing the city in light. And as Rena stood in her office, watching the dawn of a new era, she knew with unshakable certainty that she was ready. The game had indeed just begun. But this time the board was hers. Think you've seen the whole game? Think again. The next move is already in play, and the stakes are higher than ever. Secrets are surfacing, alliances are shifting, and Rena's fight is just beginning. Stay sharp. The real story is waiting, and it's not where you expect.